A runaway girl, hid in his barn, the lonely giant Cowboy, said, "If they ask, you're my wife now." Wyoming Territory, winter of 1879. The wind howled across the snow-covered plains like a wild beast mourning the dead. A westbound train chugged through the blizzard, its iron wheels groaning against the frozen tracks. Steam hissed, trailing behind it like a ghost in flight. Inside the last passenger car, a young woman stood trembling, clutching the ivory lace of her wedding gown. Melissa Winslow's breath fogged the cold glass as she watched the darkness rush past. Her heart pounded harder than the engine. She could hear the conductor's voice echoing from the front of the train, calling the next stop, Fort Bridger, where her father's men would be waiting. There would be no escape after that, no turning back. Not if she wanted her life to be hers again. She didn't hesitate. She couldn't. With a cry swallowed by the wind, Melissa shoved open the side door and leapt into the snow. She hit hard. The world spun. Ice cut her palms and the cold gnawed at her skin like teeth. But she stood, dress torn, veil lost to the wind, and ran. Behind her, the train shrieked on into the night. For hours, Melissa stumbled through the white wilderness. Her silk slippers were soaked and long since lost, her feet numb and raw. Snow clung to her tangled auburn hair. The forest swallowed her whole, offering no paths, only choices, forward or freeze. She knew her father's men would come after her. Judge Harold Winslow never tolerated disobedience, especially from his only daughter. He had spent 20 years building his empire, sealing alliances, acquiring land and loyalty. Marrying her to Richard Halford, an aging railroad magnate with fists instead of hands, was the crown jewel of his plan. But Melissa knew what kind of man Richard was, and she would rather die alone in the snow than spend her life beneath his boots. A wolf howled in the distance. She turned sharply and climbed the nearest ridge, lungs burning, heart pounding with fear and fury. Then she saw it, a faint glow through the trees. A single lantern, flickering in the distance. Melissa pushed through the brush, branches scratching her arms, and came upon a small rise. Atop the hill stood a solitary ranch house made of worn timber and stubborn stone. Smoke coiled from the chimney. A barn leaned against the wind beside it. Snow drifted high against its doors. She dropped to her knees, her breath hitched with relief. Light meant fire. Fire meant warmth. And warmth meant, maybe, she could live until morning. She forced herself up and staggered across the clearing. The barn door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, it was dark, the air thick with hay and the earthy scent of animals. A few horses turned to glance at her. One snorted. Melissa pressed herself into the far corner, behind a stack of hay. She curled into a ball, hugging her arms tight around her chest. Her body shook violently. Her lips whispered, over and over, "Just until morning. Just until morning." But the world did not give her mercy. Somewhere out in the dark, hooves pounded the earth. A whistle cracked through the air. 3 riders, dressed in black and gray, swept through the trees like phantoms. Their lanterns swung low, searching. Melissa held her breath. They passed the ridge. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. Bo Reeves Ranch, sunrise, Wyoming border. The sun cracked the edge of the sky with a pale orange glow, stretching timid light over the snow-covered hills. Frost clung to the beams of the barn, and the horses stirred restlessly, their breath misting in the chilled morning air. Bo Reeves stood at the edge of his porch, a steaming mug in his hand, watching the trees like he always did, silent, observant, worn. The snow had fallen deep last night, deeper than he expected for November. It made the woods quieter than usual, as if the world was holding its breath. Then came the sound, not loud, not threatening, just out of place. A creak, wood against wood. He turned his head slowly toward the barn. The horses didn't panic. Whatever was inside wasn't a predator, but it was something. Bo set down his mug and walked slowly across the snow, boots crunching softly. He unlatched the barn door and stepped inside. At first, all he saw was shadow and hay. Then, in the far corner, movement. A woman, curled behind a haystack, her white dress torn and caked with mud, her bare feet scraped and blue from cold. Auburn hair tangled over her shoulders like fire twisted in storm. Her eyes met his, and that was the part that stopped him. They weren't the eyes of someone pleading. They weren't filled with fear. They were defiant. Alive. Bo didn't move for a long moment. Neither did she. Then he took off his coat, stepped closer, and without a word, knelt and wrapped a thick wool blanket around her shoulders. The girl flinched at first, then let herself breathe. Her whole body trembled as warmth crept back into her skin. "I won't hurt you," he said, voice low, gravelly. "You can stay until the cold passes." Melissa's lips parted, but no words came, only a nod. Bo stood and walked away without another glance. He left the barn door open just enough for light and closed it without sound. By the time morning broke clear and gold, Bo was splitting wood beside the house. He had put out oats and water for the horses, and for her, if she could manage to rise. He didn't ask questions. He never did. Everyone had a reason to run. That was when he saw them. 3 riders, dressed in fine coats and city boots, came trotting through the trail, moving with the sharpness of men on orders. Bo set the axe down and waited. They approached slowly, eyes sharp, hands near their holsters. "Morning," the tallest one said. "We're looking for someone." Bo said nothing. "Girl, young, red hair, wearing white. She jumped a train outside Laramie last night." Bo's jaw didn't tighten. His eyes didn't shift. He simply turned his head slightly, enough to glance toward the barn. Then he stepped forward and called out calmly, "Darlin', come on out." For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the barn door creaked, and Melissa stepped out slowly, wrapped in the blanket, hair braided back in a quick, messy twist. She stood barefoot in the snow beside him. Bo reached out and placed his hand gently, deliberately, on her shoulder. "She's here," he said, "and she's mine. If you're asking, this is my wife." Melissa swallowed hard, her spine straightened. The men exchanged glances. "You sure?" one asked. "She looks like—" "I said she's mine." There was steel in Bo's tone, and something more dangerous than a raised rifle, certainty. The men hesitated. Then, one tipped his hat. No trouble then. They turned and rode off, fading into the morning mist. When they were gone, Bo looked at Melissa. His hand dropped away. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly, "but whatever you're running from, it just bought a little more time." The snow lingered for days, blanketing the land in a cold silence that softened everything, except the tension inside the house. Melissa moved quietly through the wooden rooms, careful not to disturb more than she needed. She swept the hearth, washed the tin plates in cold water, folded the extra quilts. It was the kind of work she had never done before, raised among porcelain and servants and the clipped voices of high society. But here, it felt grounding. Bo didn't speak much. He'd nod in approval or gesture toward a task, always with that calm, unreadable face. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her, not with suspicion, but like he was trying to understand what kind of storm she had blown in with. In the mornings he showed her how to feed the horses, how to approach them slow, palm flat. She watched his massive hands move with a gentleness that surprised her. He taught her to swing a rope, to stack wood properly, to hold a rifle with both strength and respect. "You ever shoot?" he asked one afternoon, holding out the Winchester. She looked at the gun like it might bite her. "No," she said, "but I'm willing to learn." He gave her a short nod. That was all he ever gave, but it felt like something. The townsfolk came by after the third day. A knock at the door, loud and cheerful. Melissa had been baking bread, a disaster of a loaf she was trying to hide. When Bo opened it, well, look who finally settled down. A woman beamed from the porch, flanked by her husband and a boy holding a sack of potatoes. "We heard you took yourself a wife, Bo. About damn time." Melissa froze, flour on her hands. Bo didn't answer, just stepped aside to let them in. The visitors came bearing gossip and congratulations. They asked questions. How long had they known each other? Where had they married? What brought her west? Bo stayed silent. Melissa, flustered, found herself answering with half-truths and stumbling improvisation. "We met some time ago," she said, brushing hair from her face. It was a quiet ceremony. They nodded, satisfied. No one probed too deep. In towns like these, folks didn't dig unless they were paid to. After they left, Melissa laughed for the first time. A real, startled laugh. Bo looked at her with raised brows. "What?" he asked. "You," she grinned, "are the worst liar I've ever seen." He gave a shrug. "Didn't have to lie. Just let you do the talking." She shook her head, still smiling. That night, they shared dinner without tension. She burned the beans, and he said nothing, just passed her the salt, like it might fix everything. He noticed she sang sometimes, under her breath, when she thought he wasn't listening. Old hymns. Melodies from a life she hadn't quite let go of. One evening, as the fire crackled low and the wind beat at the windows, she turned to him suddenly. "Why did you say it?" Bo looked up from whittling a piece of wood. "Say what?" "That I was your wife. You didn't know me." He studied the fire. His voice came low. "Didn't need to know you. I just saw someone cold, hunted, and scared, and I had room in the barn." Melissa nodded. Her eyes lingered on him a little longer that night. They didn't touch. They didn't even sit close. But something had shifted. They began to laugh a little more, even if it was just at her failed cooking or his expression when she tried to braid a horse's mane. It was pretend, all of it. But sometimes, in the quiet between chores and snowstorms, the pretending felt real. The moon hung full over the white hills, bathing the world in a pale glow. The snow sparkled like crushed glass. All was still, until a branch cracked somewhere deep in the woods. Bo's eyes snapped open. He sat up in his bed, listening. Not the wind, not an animal. Footsteps. He moved like a shadow, slipping on his boots and coat. He grabbed the rifle, leaning against the wall, and stepped outside, careful not to make a sound. The tracks were faint, but fresh, leading from the edge of the woods straight toward the barn. Not Melissa's. These were heavier, male, booted, armed. Bo's jaw tightened. He disappeared into the trees. Earlier that day, Melissa had gone walking, just to clear her head. She had not strayed far, but the snow was melting near the pines, and her footprints had sunk deep into the thawing ground. Now, one of those tracks had betrayed her. The man following them crouched low, scanning the earth. Tall, wiry eyes sharp like a vulture. A scar ran down his jaw. Colt Wheeler, one of Harold Winslow's most loyal hounds. He saw the barn and smiled. He crept forward, pistol drawn. From behind a tree, Bo watched. He waited until the man was within 10 feet of the barn door before stepping out. "Do not move," Bo said, voice like a slow avalanche. Colt spun, gun raising. Bo's rifle was already aimed. "I will shoot to wound," Bo warned. "If you move again, it won't be the leg." Colt froze. "I'm here for the girl," he said. "She don't belong to you." "She belongs to no one," Bo replied. "But she's under this roof now. That makes her my responsibility." "You know who sent me?" "I know." Colt's hand twitched near his hip. Bo fired. The shot cracked through the woods, echoing off the mountains. Colt's hat flew off. A splinter of bark from the tree behind him exploded. He dropped his weapon and raised both hands. Bo approached slowly, eyes never leaving the man. Melissa had come out of the house when she heard the shot. She stood on the porch in her shawl, watching, heart pounding. Bo picked up Colt's gun and tossed it into the snow. "You ride out," Bo said, "and you tell your boss that this girl is under protection. Mine. If he wants to come himself, let him. But you don't set foot here again." Colt grinned through gritted teeth. "You got a death wish, cowboy." "No," Bo said calmly. "I had that already. It passed. He backed away, rifle steady, until Colt mounted his horse and disappeared into the trees. Bo turned to find Melissa standing there, eyes wide, lips parted. "You could have killed him," she whispered. He nodded. "I know. But you didn't." He walked past her, toward the house. "I have killed men," he said quietly, "during the war. Too many. Some deserved it. Some, I still see their faces." Melissa followed slowly, the snow crunching beneath her bare feet. "I do not aim to add to that number unless I must," Bo said, "but I will not stand by while someone tries to drag you back into chains." She stared at him, this giant of a man who had once been a soldier, a killer, and now chose restraint over blood. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He paused at the door, then looked back at her. "Because you looked me in the eyes that first night," he said, "and you didn't ask for anything. You just wanted to survive." A breath passed between them. No wind, no sound, just two souls in the snow. Melissa reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. They walked inside together. The sky turned dark without warning. What had been a quiet, cold afternoon shifted into a storm within minutes. Clouds rolled in like fists, and wind snapped through the trees with a howl. Melissa stood at the kitchen window, watching the horizon pulse with flashes of silver. Then came the thunder, deep, low, and angry. Bo stepped in from outside, wet already from the first spit of rain. "Storm's fast," he said, pulling off his coat. "Might be a rough one." He had barely finished the sentence when a crack of lightning split the sky and struck somewhere nearby. The ground seemed to shake. A second later, a smell hit the air, acrid, sharp. Smoke. Bo's head snapped toward the barn. He was out the door before Melissa could speak. She followed, skirts gathered in her arms, feet slipping in the mud. The rain was coming down in heavy sheets now, cold and stinging. Flames licked up the side of the barn, flickering orange and violent against the gray sky. Bo kicked the doors open, shouting for the horses. The animals screamed inside, panicked and thrashing. "Get the water barrels," he barked. Melissa didn't hesitate. She ran to the side troughs, grabbed a bucket, and began tossing water against the fire. It was nearly useless in the rain, but she didn't stop. Her arms ached, her hair stuck to her face, her dress dragged with mud, but she kept going. Bo disappeared into the smoke. One of the horses, his chestnut mare, was trapped in the far stall, kicking wildly. He wrapped his coat around her face and pulled with all his strength, guiding her out into the storm. Just as the roof gave a groan, Melissa screamed, but Bo dove low, dragging the horse clear as a beam collapsed behind them. They burst out into the rain together, horse and man and smoke trailing from their backs. Bo let the reins go. The mare galloped into the trees. Melissa ran to him. He dropped to his knees, coughing, soaked through. She was beside him in an instant, hands on his face. "Are you hurt?" she asked, voice shaking. He shook his head. His breath came in broken gasps. "You went back in," she said. "It was the only way," he answered. She helped him to his feet, and they stumbled to the fence line. There, under the pounding rain, they collapsed against each other. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Bo looked at her, and in that moment, something inside him cracked. "I used to believe in fire," he said. "Thought it could burn the bad out of the world. Thought it could give back what was taken." "Thought." Melissa's eyes searched his face. "I was 17 when the war came to our land. I fought for the South because my father did. Never questioned it, until I came home and found everything gone. Union soldiers burned the house, hanged my brother, put a bullet in my mother. My father was never found." She didn't move, just listened. "I spent years after that tracking blue coats," he continued. "Not for justice, for revenge. Every man I killed, I told myself it was for them, but it never brought them back, never filled the hole." His voice dropped to a whisper. "By the time I stopped, I didn't know who I was anymore. So I came out here, where no one knew my name, where I wouldn't have to look in the mirror and see a ghost." Melissa reached out, brushing a streak of soot from his cheek. "You're not a ghost," she said. "You saved that horse. You saved me." He looked at her, rain washing the ash from his skin. "I don't know how to be anything else," he said. She leaned in closer. "Then let's find out together." Their fingers touched. No kiss, no grand declaration. Just two people, broken and breathing, sharing shelter in a world that had taken too much. And for the first time in a long time, the rain didn't feel like punishment. They came just after dawn. 3 riders in uniform approached the ranch with calculated pace, followed by a black coach glistening with wet mud. Melissa saw them from the window and knew instantly this wasn't a courtesy call. Her breath caught. Bo stepped outside without his rifle. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't flinch. He just stood still as the men dismounted and surrounded him. The lead officer unfolded a paper. "Bo Reeve," he called. "You are under arrest for harboring a fugitive and impersonating a legal spouse to obstruct pursuit. You'll come with us quietly." Bo's eyes flicked once toward the door, where Melissa stood frozen. "It's not a lie," she said, stepping out. "I stayed of my own will. I told him nothing. He's not to blame." The officer barely looked at her. "That's for the court to decide." They bound Bo's hands. Melissa ran to him. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," he said. "It was always going to catch up to me. I just didn't expect it to matter by then." She gripped his sleeve, but they pulled him away. The coach door opened, and a new figure stepped down, tall, gray at the temples, cold as the iron clasp of a jailhouse gate. Judge Harold Winslow. His gaze swept the yard like he was inspecting livestock. "Melissa." Her name was a command. She turned slowly. "Father, you have caused quite the spectacle." Bo was shoved into the coach. The door slammed shut. Harold approached her, gloves tucked neatly into his coat. "You will come with me. Now." Melissa wanted to scream, to claw the earth, but she had nothing left but her voice. "I won't marry him." Harold didn't blink. "You will. The Halford arrangement is still in place. He has agreed to forgive your detour, so long as you're presentable by next week." "And Bo?" Harold gave a dismissive glance toward the coach. "The man's a criminal and a liar. You're lucky he didn't drag you into something worse." "He didn't lie. He protected me when no one else would." Her father's jaw tightened. "He's beneath you." Melissa's voice trembled, but her spine stayed straight. "You sent men to hunt me like I was an animal. You never asked why I ran. You never cared." "I cared about your future," he said coldly. "The Winslow name commands respect. You were meant to elevate it, not soil it in some godforsaken barn." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and bitter. "Do you even know me, Father? Do you know what I love, what I fear, what I dream of?" Harold didn't answer. He simply turned his back. "We leave in an hour. Make yourself decent." The Winslow camp was set along a river bend, lined with polished wagons and armed guards. That night, Melissa sat alone in a canvas tent trimmed with brass. A mirror stood in one corner, a wedding dress in another. Bo was locked in a holding cart, bound at the wrists, guarded like a wild dog. Melissa stared at the lamp beside her. The flame danced like it knew something she didn't. She rose. Outside, the camp was quiet, save for the occasional cough of a soldier or crackle of the fire. She walked without shoes, slipping past the guards, past the pump, until she stood before her father's tent. He was reading legal documents by candlelight. He looked up. "Changed your mind?" "I understand now," she said, voice calm. "That man is more honorable than you've ever been." His face darkened. "You don't care who I marry. You only care who signs the papers." "You're right," he snapped, "because love is fleeting. Legacy is not." Melissa's eyes shimmered, but her voice was strong. "Then you've lost me forever." She turned and walked out, leaving the door flapping in the wind. Somewhere behind her, the candle blew out. The courthouse sat in the heart of a dust-choked town, its wooden walls aged by wind and sun. On most days it handled land disputes and cattle theft, but today every bench was filled. Bo stood at the front of the room, hands unshackled but still guarded. His broad shoulders were stiff, his eyes focused ahead. He did not look for Melissa. He didn't expect her to be there. The judge, a man younger than Harold Winslow but with the same stone-carved demeanor, read the charges aloud. Bo Reeve, you are accused of aiding and abetting the unlawful escape of Melissa Winslow and of impersonating her lawful spouse to obstruct legal pursuit. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The district attorney rose. Your Honor, the facts are clear. Mr. Reeve provided shelter to a fugitive, deliberately misrepresented her status to pursuing agents, and prevented the execution of a legal retrieval order authorized by her father. Bo's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. And the girl herself? The judge asked. There was a pause. Then the doors creaked open. Every head turned. Melissa stepped inside, cloak drawn tight against her shoulders, face bare and resolute. She walked down the aisle with the certainty of someone who had already lost everything, and chose to fight anyway. She stood beside Bo, eyes never leaving the judge. Miss Winslow, the judge said, surprised, you were not summoned to testify. I'm not here to testify, she replied. I'm here to be counted. And what does that mean exactly? It means, she said, voice rising just enough to carry, that I am not a fugitive, I am not a victim, and Bo Reeve is not guilty of anything, except keeping a promise I never deserved. The crowd stirred. The judge frowned. Miss Winslow, this court needs facts, not sentiment. Melissa stepped forward. Her voice did not shake. I am Melissa Winslow, daughter of Judge Harold Winslow, and I declare, before this court, that Bo Reeve is my husband. Gasps echoed through the room. The prosecutor shot to his feet. This marriage was never recorded. There's no license, no officiant. This is a fabrication. Melissa turned to him. You want proof? She said. Ask me who carried me through snow with bare hands. Ask who protected me from armed men without firing a bullet that didn't have to fly. Ask who treated me like a person when my own father treated me like a bargaining chip. She looked back at Bo. He was frozen. Do I have papers? No. Do I have a ring? No. But I have something stronger than all that. I chose him. With every breath, I chose him. And in my heart, I was his wife the moment he laid a blanket on my shoulders instead of a rope around my neck. Silence blanketed the room. The judge leaned back, silent for a long moment. In this territory, he said slowly, a declaration made in public, witnessed by community, and uncontested by either party, can constitute a lawful common-law marriage. He turned to Bo. Do you contest it? Bo's voice came low, steady. I do not. The judge nodded. Then this court finds insufficient cause to pursue charges. Case dismissed. The gavel struck. And the room erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. People who had once whispered behind their hands now stood, tipping hats, nodding with approval. Melissa looked at Bo. He didn't smile, he didn't cry, but in his eyes, something shifted. Peace. She took his hand. This time, he didn't let go. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it painted the world in wild colors. The snow had long melted, giving way to open fields, scattered with bluebells and prairie clover. Birds returned to the skies, and the river behind Bo's land ran clearer than it had in seasons. Melissa stood barefoot in the tall grass, the hem of her dress brushing against blooming stems. The gown was simple, off-white cotton, stitched by her own hands. It bore no lace, no corset, no jewels, but it carried her story in every thread. She had sewn it at night by lamplight, each loop a promise to herself, and to the man who now waited beneath the lone cottonwood tree. Bo stood straighter than usual. His hair was combed, his vest clean, his boots polished like he'd been preparing for weeks, though anyone who knew him guessed he probably had. And for the first time anyone could remember, he smiled, a real, honest, unguarded smile. The ceremony was brief, spoken under the sky and blessed by wind. No church bells, no judge. Just Reverend Thompson, who had once patched up Beau's shoulder with a whiskey rag and a prayer, reading words older than any town line. Around them, a handful of neighbors gathered, not out of curiosity, but respect. Men who had shared trail rides, women who'd brought Melissa broth during winter, children who now called her Miss Lissa when they passed the fence. When Beau took her hands, his fingers trembled, not with fear, but with awe. "You still sure?" he whispered. "I was sure the day you called me your wife to strangers," she whispered back. "This just makes it true for us." The Reverend pronounced them joined, and the crowd clapped softly, reverently. There was no grand feast, no champagne, but there was fresh bread, wild honey, and laughter carried on the wind. Beau helped an old man to his wagon. Melissa held a baby while its mother ate. It was not extravagant, but it was everything. As the sun dipped low, casting the hills in gold, Melissa brought out the horses. Her hair was tied back with a strip of fabric from the train dress she had once fled in. Beau mounted first, then reached a hand to her. She swung up beside him with practiced ease. Together, they rode. Across the open land, through flowers and breeze, and the wide, forgiving silence of the West. They said nothing, because there was nothing left to prove. Far in the distance, the house waited for them, a home not built of stone or law, but of choice, of shared struggle, of quiet love grown in soil that once knew only solitude. Two figures, side by side, riding into a life that neither of them had planned, but both had chosen. Where no one owned them. Where love was not forced, nor traded. Where freedom began, not in running, but in staying. And somewhere between the hooves and the wind, the land seemed to whisper back, "You're home now." If this story stirred something in your heart, if it made you believe, even for a moment, that love can bloom in the harshest places, then you're in the right place. At Wild West Love Stories, we bring you tales where bullets missed but hearts didn't. Stories of loyalty, sacrifice, and love that defied law, blood, and time. If you felt the weight of Melissa's choice, if Beau's quiet strength moved you, then don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a single heartbeat from the American frontier. This is just one love story. We've got 1,000 more waiting to be told. Welcome to the ride. Welcome to Wild West Love Stories.